More energy will fall on the world's deserts in 6 hours than the entire planet will consume over the next year. The Sahara Desert is well known as the largest hot desert in the world, but it's probably even bigger than you might think. It's nearly the size of China, spanning across 10 different countries and 3 separate time zones, and it's absolutely bombarded by sunlight. Take a look at this map, which shows the annual hours of sunshine across the globe. There are some notable hotspots in North America, South America, and Southern Africa, but nowhere on Earth receives as much sunlight as the Sahara Desert. Most of this area, which is about the size of China, gets more than 3,600 hours of sun each year. Within that, there's a section that receives more than 4,000 hours annually. For reference, that's nearly 4 times the amount of sunlight that Germany gets in a year. This happens because the Sahara is positioned nearly along the Tropic of Cancer, meaning that for a significant portion of the year, the sun is almost directly overhead. Plus, clouds rarely ever form or even exist across the desert, so this constant sunlight is never interrupted. As a result, the Sahara is arguably the best place on Earth to set up solar panels and build solar farms. And by the way, this video is the best place for you to hit that like button and subscribe. So this brings us to the question, what if we covered the entire Sahara Desert with solar panels? How much energy could we actually produce, and how would that change the world? Let's dive into that. First, let's start with this. This is the Noor Solar Power Station in Morocco, currently the largest concentrated solar power plant in existence. It's a marvel of modern engineering. Once fully completed and operational, the plant will cover an area of 25 square kilometers and produce 582 megawatts of electricity. It can even store solar energy in the form of superheated molten salt, allowing for extended electricity production even at night. Morocco has invested over $9 billion into its solar energy goals and plans to build 4 more similar plants in the Sahara. Together, these plants will generate over 2,000 megawatts of electricity, which will be enough to supply roughly 38% of Morocco's annual electricity needs. This project is turning Morocco into the world's leading solar energy state. And as the only African country currently connected to Europe via an energy cable, much of this energy will be exported to countries in the European Union. But all of this energy comes from just 5 relatively small plants. What happens when we scale things up and think a bit bigger? One of the few organizations looking at solar energy production in the Sahara in the future is the German energy company Desertec, which also happens to be an investor in the Moroccan solar project. According to their research and data from the German Aerospace Center, a solar panel array in the Sahara of a similar scale could provide 100% of Germany's electricity needs. A solar array of that size could power the entire European Union, while an even larger array could meet all of the world's modern electricity needs, around 18 trillion watts, give or take. Considering that a typical solar panel generates approximately 350 watts of energy, that means this global power array would require about 51.4 billion solar panels and would cover an area roughly the size of the US state of New Mexico. That's quite a bit of land, but nothing compared to the vastness of the Sahara Desert, which also happens to be incredibly sparsely populated. Only about 2.5 million people live in the Sahara, meaning its population density is comparable to that of Siberia. This means large solar farms could be set up here without having a major negative impact on the local inhabitants. Now, the Desertec project doesn't aim to turn the entire Sahara into a solar farm, but the vision is still quite ambitious. The overall idea is to build a series of large solar farms around the perimeter of the Sahara and deeper into the Middle East. Once completed, this network of solar farms could meet most of the electricity needs of Africa and the Middle East, while any surplus power could be sent through cables to Europe, supplying up to 15% of the continent's electricity demands. This is a real-world plan that has undergone substantial research and investment. But why are they only planning to build solar farms around the perimeter of the Sahara? Well, while there are many clear benefits to building solar farms in the empty desert, there are also plenty of challenges. First of all, the Sahara's emptiness is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it means that almost no one would need to be relocated or removed from their land. On the other hand, there's little infrastructure to transport the enormous amounts of supplies needed to the site in a cost-effective way. Just look at this map. There are only about 4 roads stretching across the Sahara from north to south. Huge swathes of land in the desert are completely devoid of roads. Some of these areas, like this spot in northwest Chad, are more than 600 kilometers from the nearest road. Transporting billions of solar panels to a remote area like that would require building countless expensive new highways or railroads to get them there. Which is why Desertec plans to build the plants around the Sahara's edges. But let's put all that aside for a moment and just focus on the cost of the solar panels themselves. For a solar array the size of the Sahara, an average 350-watt panel typically costs between $200 and $450. Since we know it'll be costly to transport and install all of them in one of the most remote locations on Earth, let's keep things on the higher end of the estimate and add another $300 for delivery and infrastructure fees, plus $250 more for installation costs. Conveniently, this math brings the total cost for each 350-watt panel to exactly $1,000. So from here, you can quickly figure out that the 51.4 billion solar panels required to fill our New Mexico-sized array that would power the entire planet would cost a nice $51.4 trillion US. For reference, that's roughly 60% of the entire world's GDP. But it would allow us to immediately switch all our electricity needs to renewable solar power, which is pretty cool. All right, so now let's assume we hit the infinite money button and go ahead with filling the entire Sahara Desert with solar panels. What happens now? Well, for starters, assuming that these panels are 100% efficient, the entire Sahara Desert would likely be generating around 1.3 million terawatt-hours of electricity per year. To put that number into perspective, all of humanity consumed about 173,000 terawatt-hours of energy in 2019. And that's not just electricity, that's all the energy consumed for everything we did that year. A Sahara Desert covered in solar panels would generate over 7 times the amount of energy that all of the nearly 8 billion humans on the planet collectively consume right now. Obviously, this would bring about revolutionary changes in what humanity would be capable of doing. Not only would we be inching closer to becoming a Type 1 Kardashev civilization, but the sheer power given to humanity by harnessing the entire Sahara would also come with some significant costs. The black surfaces of the solar panels dotting the Sahara would of course absorb most of the sunlight hitting the desert. Only a small fraction of that incoming energy would actually be converted into electricity, while the majority would be returned to the environment as heat. In turn, this heat would trigger a kind of feedback loop, where the heat emitted from the solar panels would create a steep temperature differential between the land and the surrounding oceans. This would eventually lower surface atmospheric pressure, causing moist air to rise and condense into clouds and rainfall all over the desert. So, by covering the entire Sahara with solar panels, we'd also be inadvertently terraforming the Sahara Desert into a green Sahara at the same time. In some ways, this would be a good thing because it would open up a huge amount of land, the size of China, for human colonization, settlement, and, crucially, the extensive economic development of the countries and people of North Africa. But in other ways, this could be really bad. The Amazon rainforest in South America is extensively fed and fertilized by the dust that comes from the Sahara, which is blown across the Atlantic. Atlantic ecosystems also benefit from this fertile dust. Removing all the sand from the Sahara Desert could trigger a cascade of unforeseen events that might wipe out entire ecosystems in the Atlantic, the Amazon, and likely beyond, potentially creating an epic climate disaster unlike anything we've ever seen before. Covering the entire Sahara Desert with solar panels would be epic, but it's also not really feasible. In fact, it's probably quite dangerous and not even necessary. All we'd really need is solar panels covering an area the size of New Mexico to meet the modern electricity needs of all 8 billion humans. And they don't even need to be concentrated in one spot. They could be spread across the deserts of the world or anywhere else that gets plenty of sunlight. Hopefully, by the end of this century, we'll have made some solid progress toward this goal.